The firearm we're going to be using for today's demonstrations is the SIG 320 M17. This was the firearm recently adopted by the United States military, which is to say 2017. Has a safety. They even have a smaller version of it for concealment called the M18. This is a brand new gun. Haven't shot it a ton, so far I like it. Very good weapon so far. Hello everyone and welcome back to AmmoMart.com. It's a chilly day, but it's always a good day to be on the range. Today we're going to test the stopping power of a 9mm bullet. There, I said it. I know there's a lot of controversy out there surrounding the idea that the 9mm is not powerful enough for some people's taste. Hopefully we can attach some scientific data to that determination to see whether we're actually making the right conclusion. We're going to use 115 grain jacketed hollow point as well as a 147, which some would argue is the most stopping power one can get from a 9mm. I'll also try to convey to you from a shooter's point of view what the difference in recoil is, if there's any. As we go downrange, I'd like to show you our setup so we can kind of have a clearer understanding of what's actually going on with the test. This will closely mimic the FBI ballistic test, which is a 10-foot range, 10% ballistic gelatin with some clothes on it, which is 2 layers of t-shirt type material, fleece surrounded by denim. So we sort of have a realistic street test on whether or not the bullet has enough stopping power. Keep in mind, the 9mm has been around for more than 100 years. It's been adopted by countless militaries and police forces worldwide. One would hope that it has enough stopping power, depending on what your definition of that is. And as we go forward, keep in mind, this isn't a lab, just hopefully some useful data for our viewers at home. So let's go downrange and take a look at what we got. The FBI standard called for a 10-foot distance between where the gun is fired and the front edge of the gelatin. What I have, of course, is my t-shirt material, fleece and denim. These individual blocks of gelatin are 16 inches long. The FBI preference for this test was for penetration of 12 to 18 inches. So hopefully as we move along in our demonstration, I can flip one of the blocks around, and clear gelatin is very good at illustrating whether the cavities are as far as hydrostatic pressure goes. So without further ado, let's load up the gun and see what happens. We're going to begin today's test with a 115 grain jacketed hollow point spear gold dot. As we discussed, we have our ballistic gelatin in place. Hopefully the chronograph will record all of this. If it does not, to preserve the integrity of the gelatin, I'm just going to continue. So if you happen to notice at home the chronograph doesn't record every shot, I think it's more important to preserve the integrity of the gelatin. So here we go. Take this guy off a safe and see what we can do here. And I anticipated having to reset after every shot, but that's okay. And just so our viewers at home don't get confused, one of the positive aspects about a reset every time is you can see our entry point, and I'm trying to stay on the side so it doesn't interfere with each individual shot. We have complete penetration of the first block and arguably roughly 2 inches into the next block, which was the maximum end of FBI preference between 12 and 18. So this one will be the second shot, 115 grain spear gold dot. Once again, we'll have to reset, put the weapon on safe. And I'm not sure, but hopefully you can notice it penetrated almost exactly as much as the first one. So good gun. We talked about the recoil of the 115 grain. Even though it's a jacketed hollow point, the weight of this gun and the way it's designed, I really got to tell you, it's an extremely soft shooting gun at 115. I'm sure it will be at 147 as well, but recoil is extremely manageable. Now I'm going to move up a little higher and see if I can stay out of this first and second bullet's path of travel. Put the weapon on safe even though it's empty. Go down range real quick and check him out. Oh yeah, so difficult to tell perhaps. I stayed a little higher. Amazingly consistent, and it looks like that there's still copper wrapped around the projectile, except there's one here that might be a fragment. It's hard to tell until you carve them apart, but very interesting. We're going to fire 3 bullets of a 147 grain jacketed hollow point. These are the SIG V-Crown product line. I've never particularly shot this bullet, nor have I seen it into gel, so I'm as curious as you are, perhaps. And once again, I will try to demonstrate what the recoil differences are, if there are any, as compared to 115 versus 147. So, I'm going to cancel the safety and see what we get. One interesting little sidebar, that was a 147 grain. It actually has less snappy recoil than the 115. The heavier bullet seems to lift the muzzle a lot less, at least in my humble. So even though you have a heavier bullet and some would argue a more effective, powerful bullet, recoil was actually less. This will be shot number 2 with the 147. And that guy kicked out 2. This one right here, roughly 17 to 18 inches. One more with the 147. And our FBI test will be concluded. Weapons on safe. And, aha, yes. So we had one short one at 15, the other 2 penetrated almost identically to the 115 grain. And of course with 147, what you get is more mass. One of the final things we'd like to try is moving our ballistic gel out to 164 feet. That's 50 meters. The reason why we'd like to give this test a try is when the rounds were accepted by the military, originally German, then Belgian, then NATO, and then American, one of the requirements was that the round had to be deadly at 50 meters. So to stay within those sort of military type of testing criteria, I'm going to use a 124 grain NATO round, which has a little more pressure and a little different weight than 115, which I have over here on the table. So that test will be done with a standard ball round. So to conclude our testing today, we're going to fire some 124 grain NATO spec rounds at 50 meters. A long way down, 164 feet later, is our ballistic gelatin. Once again, we have them end to end. Hopefully we'll see at least 12 to 18 inches of penetration with the ball round. I'm not really sure. I've never really worked at this kind of distance before. And man, is 50 meters away down there. Hopefully I won't make a fool of myself. I'm going to make the weapon safe. That was 3 attempts. At 50 meters, shooting it offhand, I wasn't real confident. And one of the surprising things I learned as I walked up here is this is actually an entry point for one of the rounds. And that's very strange because I was actually aiming like a 6 o'clock hold. And we still have a lot of height on the target, which you wouldn't expect. At least I didn't at that distance. So kind of a learning teaching point for myself. But we entered here, and if we kind of move around, you can see how this is the 124 grain completely coated projectile. These are from our previous testing with the jacketed hollow points. Amazingly enough, if I can kind of get you a backwards glance at our range, there's our tripod, and that guy still penetrated well beyond the FBI spec at that distance, which to me would certainly lend itself to the idea that the 9mm in various forms related to jacketed hollow points or FMJs, more than enough power. That's actually kind of impressive to me, that it's got that kind of punch at that kind of distance and is on that sort of flight path. So very effective bullet. So I'd like to end with some final thoughts on our range time today. First thing, 9mm, plenty of power. Next thing is, for those of you that ever try to shoot at this distance, without calculating the actual arc of the bullet, my instinct was to aim up higher on the target, compensating for the drop. And as it turned out, with this particular brand of bullet and weight and this gun, barrel length and all that, I actually needed to aim a little lower. Every time I attempted to get the target, putting it higher, it was a complete miss. We spoke earlier in our videos about the integrity of testing we'd like to share with you guys. So I fired at that target end distance 6 times, and I struck the ballistic gelatin twice. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up is a lot of you might not find that to be a high percentage hit ratio, but this was the very first time I ever fired the SIG 320. And in my humble opinion, the United States government got this one correct. This is an excellent handgun. You have to keep in mind, they buy it for a lot of different applications. This is not by any stretch of the imagination a front sight that one would like to shoot this distance at, which is to say the front sight post obscures a lot of the target. So it's a little bit of instinct, experience, and let's be honest, a little bit of luck. However, I confidently can tell you I would have struck a body-sized torso target every time. I was extremely close, even on the misses. So, excellent handgun, 9mm, excellent cartridge. Absolutely bona fide man stopper, regardless of what some of you might have heard. Thank you for your time. Don't be afraid to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep doing some fun stuff.